I'm Paul Whitcover, and I will be reading from my forthcoming novel, Lincolnstein, which is out from PS Publishing in the fall of 2021. This book, as you might expect from the title, is an alternate history that takes place immediately after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and kind of mashes up some familiar characters from American history and literature that I think you will find recognizable and need no further introduction from me on that score. So I'm going to just jump right in. Thank you so much for listening. This takes place in chapter 5, actually, of the novel. Finn had ridden hard through the night, sure that he was closing at last with his man. Since leaving the train, he had followed a broken trail of whispers and stories shared by folks who claimed to have seen and spoken with someone the whole world now knew had been shot dead by an assassin 10 days ago. Some had confided willingly in him, others had required persuasion in the form of whiskey or dollars, or both. Some had lied shamelessly, others artfully, and still others, he knew, had spoken the truth or enough of the truth to light his fitful way to this Virginia town, Port Royal, still a mile or so distant in the first frail glimmer of dawn. There had not been a solitary white soul among his informants, just black men and women, black children too, as if they alone were trusted by the fugitive, despite the skin he wore, the face as famous as any in the land, to help him on his way. And yet they had spoken to Finn as if he too wore whiteness like a suit of clothes he had stolen from a dead man. Somehow they had known he could be trusted, that he was no enemy, but a friend. Where in Sam Hill you headed, Jim? He wondered as he rode fast under a moonless sky sugared with stars. What is it that has brought you here, to a town you ain't never stepped foot in, far as I know? Finn was a skilled tracker, but then so was Jim. Yet that didn't wholly account for the difficulty in following his trail. It wasn't that Jim was throwing him off with a repertoire of tricks they both knew so well. It was like the man just up and vanished from time to time at unpredictable intervals, all trace of him gone, only to surface again, miles away, in some wide-eyed tale of a sorrowful drifter in a stovepipe hat. A stovepipe hat, of all things! It was downright ridiculous, as if that hat hadn't featured in every blamed story, he would have dismissed it as exaggeration or hallucination. Yet it was the thread that stitched the stories together. It was a marker on the trail he was following, like breadcrumbs in the fairy tale. The president was said to have been a skilled woodsman in his youth, and Finn found himself remembering what the doctor had told him, that it wouldn't be just Jim anymore, once the procedure was over and done with, but bits of both men mixed together. Finn did not know if he was tracking Jim Watson or Abraham Lincoln or something else entirely. Halt! The command startled him. He sawed back on the reins as blue-clad soldiers stepped out of the still dark fringes of forest that lined the road he had been careering down, thoughts fixed on what lay ahead, a reunion at once dreaded and longed for. The horse reared, nearly throwing him. It was but the latest in a series of mounts whose names and temperaments alike were unknown to him, none of them ridden long enough for either horse or rider to get a companionable feel for the other, just two strangers bound for a time by a common duty. He wrestled the mare under control, cursing as she wheeled in a tight circle. The faces of the soldiers spun by like leering nightmare visions in the dawn light. Then some idiot fired his weapon, and he was unhorsed. Finn landed hard, sight snuffed in a white-hot explosion of pain. Was he shot? Hands hauled him to his feet. Other hands slid inside his coat, deftly removing pistol and bowie knife. He sucked for air as angry voices gabbled somewhere behind a haze of hurt. Under it all, black rage rising. He shook his head clear. Down the road, the pale hindquarters of his former mount dwindled back toward Fredericksburg, a handful of soldiers in hot pursuit. "What you doing, mister? Riding hell-bent for leather at this ungodly hour?" a rat-faced corporal with a meager mustache wanted to know. He felt like he'd been kicked in the hip by a mule. He looked down but didn't see any blood. He was too weak to wrench his arms free of the hands that held him, tried anyway, spitting curses, and got a punch in the ear for his trouble. "You ain't want to make me ask again," the corporal stated benevolently. "I'm your gall-derned superior officer," he snarled. "Captain Huck Finn, attached to the intelligence service under the direct command of Major Pinkerton, and here on his authority. Never heard of you nor of him neither. He ain't got no authority here, whoever he may be. And you can call yourself but whatever rank you please, but I don't see no uniform. All I see is a yellow-bellied deserter or a secesh spy. I demand you take me to your commanding officer. You ain't in a position to demand a goddamn thing, the corporal said. You hear that, boys? He demands. Hoots and derisive laughter on all sides. Finn still didn't have a clear idea of how many there were. Too many was all he knew. He was damned if he would end his days here, strung up to be shot, strung up or shot and left to die in the dirt like a dog. His story was not yet done. Look, boys, you got your jobs to do. I respect that. But you got to understand, I got my job too. Bring me to your CO and let me tell him what I can. He'll thank you for it. Do anything else, and you will regret it, I promise you. The corporal appeared to consider this, stroking the fern hairs of his mustache. I reckon we can hang you just as easy there as here, he said at last. Horses were brought. A private led the way, with the corporal in the rear. Finn's hip throbbed with each heavy step of his mount on the packed dirt of the road, and the corporal's unfriendly gaze felt like a slow bullet between his shoulder blades. The breath of the men and the horses fogged the crisp morning air. The only sounds were the measured clop of hooves, the soft jingle and slap of the tack, and the calls of birds greeting the new day. It was perhaps 5 o'clock. Finn did not venture conversation, and the other two men were likewise silent. They did not remain on the road for long, but turned down a narrow rutted lane lined with scrawny red-budded maples, beyond which open fields, as yet unplowed, spread in gentle steaming swells of brown and yellow and that fierce but fragile green that came to this country in April. Noisy crows congregated amid the sere remains of last season's crops, or flapped purposefully to whatever assignations awaited them. Finn noted a farmhouse on a hill a quarter-mile away, smoke rising from its chimney. A barn stood nearby, ringed by figures in blue, perhaps as many as 20. It took all his will to keep from kicking the horse into a gallop. What's the commotion up yonder? He tossed over his shoulder. Got someone holed up in the barn, the corporal responded. Who? Damned if I know. You think they tell me anything? Lieutenant cordoned the barn off and sent us to watch the road. They've been jawing all night, I reckon. Surprised he ain't stormed the place. I heard it's Jeff Davis himself in there, the private piped up. You shut your hole, said the corporal. It's true, the private insisted, looking back. I overheard some of the darkies talking when I was watering the horses up at the house. One of them said he'd seen the man. Said it was the president, sure as I'm sitting here. You think we'll get some of that reward money, Corporal? What in blazes would Jeff Davis be doing up there? He hightailed it south, heading for Mexico. Everybody knows that. The private tapped the side of his head with one finger. Which means north is the smart move. Always go where they think you ain't. That's what my daddy always said. Finn interjected. Corporal, I got to get up there right quick to speak to your lieutenant before he does something rash. What's your rush? You friends with whoever's in that barn? I done told you it's Jeff Davis, the private insisted. Will you shut up? The corporal shouted. Finn could brook no more. He kicked his mount into action, shouldering into the private and knocking the man from the saddle as he passed. The corporal cried out for him to halt, but instead he hugged the horse's soft and fragrant neck and called encouragement in the animal's ear as he kicked again, expecting at any second the report of a rifle. None came. Risking a backwards glance, he saw the corporal and the private both on the ground, each trying in vain to corral his skittish mount. Finn would have laughed had his spirits not been quailing under an apprehension akin to terror. He would not have imagined he could feel such trepidation over the fate of a dead man. The sentries had filched his pistol and knife, but they had not found the folded paper tucked into the lining of his coat. This he removed and held up in one hand like a flag of surrender. Waving it over his head and hollering, he sped up the road, through the gate of the farmhouse, and into the midst of more unfriendly faces. He pulled the horse to a stop and jumped down, wincing as his hip protested, and a dozen or more weapons were pointed in his direction. I must speak with your lieutenant, he said, still brandishing the paper as if it might stop a bullet. My business is urgent. Where is he? Here. A tall, burly man with reddish-blonde mutton-chop whiskers pushed to the front of the crowd. What do you mean riding in here like this? Who the devil are you? Captain Huck Finn, he replied, and fixed a stern gaze upon the lieutenant until the other man, with obvious reluctance, proffered a limp salute, which he crisply returned. A word, Lieutenant, if you please. We're right busy at the moment, the lieutenant demurred with a glance toward the barn, 100 or so yards distant, farther up a rise. I am here on orders of Major Pinkerton, Finn said. Pinkerton? The lieutenant's gaze snapped back to him. What Pinkerton might that be, Captain? Of the intelligence service, do you mean? The same. Then it is strange you would not know that he has been relieved of duty following the tragedy he failed to present. Lafayette Baker commands in his stead. Any orders you may carry from Pinkerton are superseded, sir. My authority comes from a higher source, Finn answered, and passed him the paper. The lieutenant took the paper, unfolded it, held it up into the wan light, squinting as if the English language were a mystery to him. Then he shot Finn a salute of the caliber he should have fired off earlier. Sir! Finn extended his hand for the paper, which he tucked back into his coat. I will be assuming command, he said meanwhile. Walk with me, Lieutenant, and acquaint me with the particulars of your situation. He drew the man toward the barn, out of earshot of his soldiers, who were glancing at each other perplexedly. Who, he broke off as two riders came careening through the gate, hallooing and brandishing weapons. The new arrivals, the corporal and the private, cantered close. Lieutenant Dougherty, sir, said the corporal, throwing a hasty salute while his eyes blazed angry promises of retribution at Finn. This man attacked Private Hurley and myself as we were conducting him here for interrogation. This man is Captain Finn, and he is now in command, Corporal, Dougherty replied. You'll be lucky if he doesn't interrogate you. That won't be necessary, said Finn. These men were doing their duty as best they understood it. I will have my weapons back, however, Corporal. He held out his hand. Well, demanded the lieutenant, don't just sit there, Jenkins. Give them back. The corporal, looking equally abashed and confused, dug into his saddlebag and produced Finn's revolver and bowie knife, both of which he passed to Finn without a word. That will be all, Corporal, Finn said. The corporal managed a befuddled salute, echoed tardily by the private. Finn turned his back and resumed his limping stroll toward the barn, the lieutenant at his side. I apologize for those two idiots, Dougherty said. What, or rather who, do you have in the barn? Finn asked. Calls himself Boyd, said Dougherty, but he's the spitting image of the stop right there, Finn interrupted with alacrity. His heart felt like it might follow his words right out of his mouth. You're not to speak another word, to me or anyone else, of Mr. Boyd. Is that clear? Yes, sir. We've tried to convince him to come out, but he won't do it. Got another man in there with him. Finn stopped at that. Another man? Yes, sir. I was thinking we might smoke him out. Light a fire under him. He rubbed his hands together briskly, as if he might kindle a flame from that alone. You'll do nothing without my order, Lieutenant. Of course, sir. Just wanted you to know my thinking. I've got men surrounding the barn, so that they can't sneak away. But we can bust down the doors and roust them if you'd prefer. I'm going to talk to them first, he said. We've been talking, sir, since 2 o'clock this morning. All the same, he said, I mean to talk to Mr. Boyd, and I mean to do it face to face. Begging the captain's pardon, but isn't that a mite risky? Some things are worth a little risk, Lieutenant. Yes, sir. The barn loomed close now. It was a ramshackle affair, its boards old and ill-fitting, seeming to stand more by habit than sound construction, with faded remnants of red paint testifying to a former respectability hard to reconcile with its present dilapidated state. The doors were padlocked shut, which struck Finn as amusing, given that the barn itself seemed hardly able to withstand a good kick. Give me the key, Finn said. Dougherty produced it from his coat pocket and handed it over. Stay close by, Finn directed. If I need you, I will call. Otherwise, hold your position. Don't do anything foolish, Lieutenant, no matter what you may hear. What if you are injured or killed? Then you will be in command again and can do as you please. Finn strode up to the door and knocked with the hilt of his knife. Mr. Boyd, I am Captain Huck Finn. I would like to speak with you privately. I am coming in. Suit yourself, came a drawling voice from the other side of the doors. But come in unarmed, or I will put a bullet in you. It was not a voice he knew. The other man, no doubt. He wondered who he was and how he had hooked up with Jim. Well, he supposed he would have answers soon enough. He was more concerned with how in tarnation he was going to extricate Jim from the barn under the watchful eyes of the lieutenant and his men. He assumed he would think of something. He generally did. Finn divested himself of his weapons, laying them on the ground. Dougherty's expression as he did so indicated that the lieutenant did not think much of the wisdom of this action. Finn did not entirely disagree. He opened the padlock. I'm coming in now, he called, and pulled the doors apart just wide enough to slip through. The interior was dark and so redolent of tobacco that the breathing the air was almost as good as a cigar. It bucked Finn up considerably. Where you at, Jim? He inquired in a kind of stage whisper. It's me, Huck. Who's Jim? Came the voice that had spoken earlier. A match flared, and a lantern was kindled to life, illuminating a handsome face begrimed with dirt and sweat. Dark eyes glinted feverishly above a drooping mustache. The man hobbled forward a step, holding the lantern up in one hand. His other hand held a carbine. There was a wooden crutch tucked into his armpit. Mr. Boyd? Finn asked. You know damn well who I am, the man more spat than said. Finn did not know, but kept his counsel. Now a second face swam into view, pale and pinched, shadowed with stubble, like some lesser satellite in orbit about the moon. "And who might you be?" Finn asked. "A man who wishes to surrender," came the prompt, if quavering, reply. "Then go, damn you," said the first man. "I do not wish to die alongside a coward." It seemed to Finn that everything the mustached man said was as if declaimed upon a stage. In truth, he felt as though he had stumbled into a play already in progress, and what's more, a very different play than he had expected, one in which he'd been assigned a role he did not know. Who were these men? Where was Jim? He regretted his hasty entrance, but knew there was nothing for it now but to bluff his way through. That skill, at least, he was well versed in. All the same, he wished he had kept his weapons. "I shall not hinder you from leaving, Mr. Harold," said the man. "David Harold. I didn't have nothing to do with it, I swear." Finn nodded, but did not take his eyes from the man with the carbine, the one, he supposed, calling himself Boyd, though that was almost certainly not his real name. "Lieutenant Dougherty," he shouted. "Can you hear me?" "Yes, sir." "Mr. Harold is coming out. He is surrendering and is not to be harmed. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir." "Get out before I shoot you, you damn traitor," snarled Boyd. Harold blanched and hurried to the door. "I'm coming out," he yelled. "Don't shoot, for the love of God." "Pass out your arms first," came Dougherty's voice. "I ain't got none," said Harold. "I know what weapons you have," said Dougherty. "Pass them out." At this Boyd interjected loudly. "I own all the arms, and may have to use them on you, gentlemen, if you prolong this any further." "He means it," Harold whined. "Let me see your hands," said Dougherty. Harold pushed them through the gap, whereupon, with a yelp like that of a kicked hound, he was yanked out of view. "I reckon that leaves the two of us, Captain Finn," said Boyd. "I can tell you right now, I ain't going to surrender like that lily-livered son of a bitch, so if that's why you're here, you might as well save your breath. I'm proud of what I've done for my country, and nothing you do can erase the bold and bloody mark I have struck on history's pages. There will be statues raised to me, sir. Children yet unborn will bear my name with pride. And what name might that be? I don't reckon any part of it is Boyd." At this the man laughed. "Do you truly not recognize me? Should I? I am John Wilkes Booth." It was more of a challenge than a statement. Booth. That was a name he had heard before. Like the actor? The same. Somehow even the slight incline of that handsome head in acknowledgment had an air of theatricality to it, as if everything the man said and did was a kind of performance before an audience of which he, Booth, was the sole adoring member. "I saw you last year in Hamlet," said Finn, whose work had given him occasion to frequent the theatre. It was an excellent place to observe others without being seen, and afforded many opportunities to cultivate useful acquaintances. "I must say, it is a wonder what make-up can accomplish. You look much younger off the stage." A tight grimace, as at a sudden sharp pain manfully borne, greeted Finn's words. "It was my older brother, Edwin, whom you saw. An accomplished thespian, as you say. But I have made my mark on a grander stage than Edwin will ever know, the stage of history, of destiny. My brother merely acts, sir. I have acted. And yet you are here, in this old barn, wounded and hunted. What action was it that led to this?" Booth gulped, looking ghoulish in the muddy yellow lantern glow silvered here and there by the purer dawn light beginning to pierce the holes and gaps of the barn's tattered shell. "Do you really not know? Where have you been these last weeks?" Finn shrugged. "On a mission that kept me far from anywhere news might travel." "Have you not heard of the tyrant's death?" "Do you mean President Lincoln?" "Not my president. He was a dictator, and for that I struck him down." He lifted the lantern above his head, as if providing himself with a spotlight. "Sic semper tyrannis, thus ever to tyrants." Finn stumbled back as though Booth had smashed the carbine into his face. He blinked, feeling numb all the way through, but knowing too that when the numbness ebbed black rage would take him, and he would let it. "You? You are the man who murdered Lincoln?" It seemed too incredible to be true. Not that this puny histrionic blowhard should be the assassin who had felled a giant, but that Finn's pursuit of Jim should have led him to this man, of all men. "No, it ain't possible." "It is more than possible. I was born for this. Yes, when I was a mere boy, a gypsy foretold my triumph and my tragedy. But I embrace it all, although I have not a single friend in this world and am everywhere beset by a thundering crowd of enemies. I embrace it, for I know, too, that in times to come I will be remembered more fondly. History will give me my due." Finn regarded the man with a wary eye. Though wounded and raving, Booth retained a firm grip on the carbine, and Finn doubted he could cross the distance between them faster than Booth could raise the gun and fire. At such close range, he would not even need to aim. "But why have you come, then?" Booth continued in what seemed genuine curiosity. as if he were not merely disappointed to learn that Finn had not known of his crime, but found Finn's presence here every bit as inexplicable and impossible to account for in light of that as Finn found Booth's presence in this place where he had thought to be reunited with Jim Watson. "Why are you here, if not for me?" "He is here for me," came a voice like a rusty nail pried in the jaws of pliers from one of the warped boards of the barn. "It is I who am here for you." Booth whirled. "Angels and ministers of grace defend us," he cried out at the sight of, as it must have appeared to him, Abraham Lincoln stepping from the shadows. The figure looked just as Finn's informants had described him, right down to the stovepipe hat. "Are you a ghost to haunt me thus? I ain't sure what I am no more." "I killed you. Your blood was my second baptism, a blessed stain on our glorious banner. You cannot be alive." The wise and sorrowful face looked past Booth, eyes crinkling. "Hey there, Huck. How you doing?" "I'm all right, Jim," he managed to reply. He had thought himself prepared for this moment, thought himself resigned to the horrible reality of the sight that faced him now. But he had been wrong. There was no getting used to it. Something so unnatural could never strike the mind as anything other than deeply, fundamentally wrong. Every sense in his body recoiled, and he felt the heavy burden of his guilt, the crushing shame of it. He was responsible for this. He had acted out of grief and love, his reason stuffed by the blow of a loss more terrible than he had ever known. But that didn't excuse anything. It just made things worse. "Don't you talk to him," Booth screamed meanwhile. "Don't you dare ignore me." "I ain't forgot about you," said Jim. "You been on my mind." "Yes, sir. There's a thread between us, some mystic cord of memory binding us each to each, drawing us together. I done followed it here. Now I mean to cut it. I mean to be free of you at last." As he spoke, he advanced on Booth, reaching out with his long arms, and Finn felt his gorge rise, remembering with awful clarity how those big hands had squeezed the doctor's neck until his head popped from his shoulders like a pea bursting from its pod. "I'll see you in hell!" Booth screamed, raising the carbine and firing at point-blank range. Jim was flung back. The stovepipe hat flew from his head. "No!" Huck cried. "Jim!" From outside the barn, Lieutenant Dougherty's voice shouted, "Captain Finn, are you all right?" Jim had not fallen. He gathered himself and strode forward again. The bullet had struck him in the chest, but there was no blood. He did not seem in the least troubled by this latest injury. "Don't you see you have to die?" asked Booth, as though explaining a simple, impersonal fact of nature to a child. "If you ain't dead, then what use am I? What has all of it been for?" A kind of paralysis fell from Finn then, and he stepped toward Booth. But before he could close with the man, a second shot rang out from across the barn. Booth cried and spun, dropping the carbine and the lantern, which shattered, spreading fire. He lay on the ground, blood pooling under his neck. Finn rushed to him, leaping over the flames, and knelt. Booth was unconscious but alive. "Huck!" When he looked up, fire had raised a wall between them. Through the flames, the creature looked like some demon standing at its ease in the depths of hell. "Why, Huck? Why'd you let them do this to me?" "I'm sorry, Jim," he said. He didn't try to hide his tears. "I never meant for none of this to happen. I just wanted you back is all. I wanted things to be like they was. Can you forgive me?" "I knowed you was following me," Jim said. "Don't do that no more. We's quit now, you and me. Where I got to go, you ain't welcome. You understand?" Finn nodded. "But won't you let me help you, Jim, just the same? There's soldiers stationed all around the barn. How you aim to get past them?" "Same way I got in," he said. "There's a tunnel leads out to the woods. Some of the field hands showed me. Seems they was smuggling slaves up north, right under the eyes of the old farmer and his sons." There was a moan from where Booth lay, though when Finn glanced down, the man was not moving. He looked up again, and Jim was gone. Before he could move to follow, the doors crashed open, and Dougherty led half a dozen men into the burning barn. "Captain Finn, are you all right, sir?" he cried as he rushed over. Finn wiped away his tears. Booth was conscious now, his eyes wide with terror, his blood-frothed lips shaping words impossible to hear. "This is John Wilkes Booth," Finn said, getting to his feet as Dougherty and the others came up. "The assassin of President Lincoln. Was it one of your men who shot him?" "Yes, sir," said Dougherty. "We heard the shot from inside the barn, and I gave the order. I had a sharpshooter stationed at a knothole. I'll make no apology, sir. I felt it was a matter of life and death." Finn nodded. "Let's get him out of here," he said. Dougherty detailed 2 soldiers to carry Booth out of the barn. "What about the fire, Captain?" "Let it burn." They brought Booth to the porch of the farmhouse. The bullet had struck him in the back of the neck, in roughly the same spot as his bullet had struck the president. It left him paralyzed. After some hours his voice returned, though the words he choked out must have seemed like pure madness to those present, except for Finn and, he judged, the blacks who watched from a ways off, their faces expressionless, inscrutable. At last Booth asked in a raw whisper for his arms to be raised, that he might see his hands. Finn gave the order. "Useless," Booth muttered as he regarded them. "Useless." "A fitting epitaph, eh?" asked Dougherty moments later, when the man had breathed his last, and they stood watching the inferno that had consumed the barn burn itself to ashes. Finn grunted and lit a cigar. He felt as though the assassin's words had pronounced the judgment upon him that he deserved but could not accept, not while Jim was still out there somewhere, alone and friendless. In all the terror and confusion and sorrow, he had forgotten about the information he had pried from Pinkerton. Jim had a right to know where his family might be found. He had warned Finn not to come after him, but Finn had never been very good at following orders. Thank you very much.